All right, thank you everybody for coming. Today we have Campus Weather Services' own Noah and Paul.
Massive crowd. I guess we can get started.
Yep.
Cool. So thank you guys for coming on this beautiful day of weather in State College. Pretty typical, I guess, for early October. So the big stories, yes, the big stories, the pun intended. Above average temps is going to continue for the next couple of days here in State College. Probably the bigger story right now is what's now ongoing down in the tropics as Tropical Storm Nate, and no, not Nathan List, just Nate, may pay the Gulf a visit in the next couple of days. Paul will delve into that in a few minutes. And then less than ideal weather for PSU at Northwestern, which is an 11 a.m. Central Time kickoff. So for the players, they have to get up and play a little bit earlier than they're used to. So we'll touch upon the weather in Evanston, Illinois a little bit. And then also I'm going to talk about if there's any signs of a possible pattern change or shift in things come mid to late month. So we'll touch on that as well. But currently outside now in State College, yeah, beautiful sunny skies you see here. Lots of clouds. Temperature now, this will play. Oh, cool, it works. I'm going to try to use this. I figured it's something different. It's 73 now in State College. It was actually 77 a few minutes ago. Dew point 63, so it's gotten a little bit more humid over the past day or so. We've got a stiff breeze out of the southwest at 13 miles an hour. Satellite radar, or just the radar, shows that it's quiet across Center County right now. But looking off to the west, there is some rain that is going to be moving through south central Pennsylvania portions of this afternoon. I don't think it's going to be terrible here, but see if I can put this in motion for you. You can get an idea of what we got going on. So we've got a weak little cold front that's kind of hanging out and sagging south across Pennsylvania today, and this little impulse of energy is bringing some rain across portions of southern Ohio. And as this continues to move east here, I'll loop this so you can see the motion. Probably be a few showers later this afternoon here in State College. You see that one little cell earlier since fizzled. There's actually a little bit of cape and there's a little bit of instability across south central PA. So I would not be surprised if this batch of precip yields a few lightning bolts or a rumble of thunder, maybe Johnstown, Altoona, but it doesn't look like, in my opinion, to be many. There's not much of a chance for thunderstorms here. But over the next couple of hours, this is going to continue to move east. And then later tomorrow, the cold front that's over us right now is going to move back north as a warm front, which will bring in some warmer air for Saturday. But let's see if I can time this out for you here, give you an idea if it keeps moving on its current heading. Yeah, later this afternoon, could be some showers, 4 o'clock hour in Altoona, about 5 o'clock in portions by 99. So later this afternoon, there'll be some showers around. It could be a heavier burst of rain, but I don't think it's going to be too terrible here. Temperatures now, again, I said 73 in State College, 70s across, a little bit warmer across southeast PA, where there was a touch of sun earlier this morning, 76 in Philly. Cooler in Pittsburgh, they've had some showers in the 60s there. But the big picture across the United States, here's that weak cold front, which is drooping south. I don't know why that random L just showed up, but this front is going to lift back to the north tomorrow evening into Saturday as a warm front, and then that will allow for some much warmer air to move in over the weekend. If I try to zoom this out here, I'll show you the rest of the United States. Okay, nope. Let's see if I can go the other way. It's tough doing this without a mouse. But yes, we've got this little batch of rain across the Ohio Valley, which again is going to move through south central PA later today. Other than that, the East Coast, speaking outside of Florida, is quiet. The little low pressure area that's impacting South Florida, we've meteorology 415 right now. We're forecasting for Miami today, so it's actually quite interesting for us. They've had 2 inches of rain already in the past 2 hours, so lots of heavy rain down here. This is not officially a named storm, I don't believe, just a low pressure area that's bringing some tropical rains to South Florida. But the bigger story, which Paul's going to talk about in a minute, is Nate. Yeah, even as a meteorologist, it's pretty hard to find where Nate is in all of that blob of mess. Somewhere in there, there's a tropical storm Nate. It's not really a organized infrared satellite. But over the next couple of days, it looks like Nate, after it's going to have some land interaction over the weekend, and then it will emerge into the Gulf of Mexico, where pretty decent model guidance shows that it's going to strengthen into maybe a Category 1 hurricane. So something that we'll have to keep tabs on in the coming days. Southeast parts of the United States, maybe the Florida Panhandle, Louisiana, could be impacted by a Cat 1 hurricane from Nate. So something we're going to have to keep tabs on. The latest Hurricane Center track has pressure of 999 millibars. It's officially moving to the northwest at 9. You see here over the next couple of days, it's going to move back out over water. It'll enter the Gulf. And then the Hurricane Center has it strengthening to Category 1 hurricane, making landfall during the morning hours on Sunday. So it does not look like it's going to be nowhere near as bad as the people down there have dealt with Harvey just sitting there in Puerto Rico. This storm's going to move right along. It's not going to sit down there. Actually, the remnant moisture is going to eventually come up in our neck of the woods. You see the rest of the track there from the Hurricane Center. Eventually, early next week, becoming a remnant low, and then those rains moving up into the northeastern parts of the United States. But through the rest of the day today, if I can play this here, this is the RPM model. Tonight, that batch of rain I mentioned earlier goes across south central PA. So if you got any classes or going out tonight, you're going to be walking around, probably be best to bring the jacket, but not expecting anything bad. Delving into the hurricane now. Before I do that, actually, I wanted to touch upon, before I toss it to Paul. Here on SCASIS, just to look back quick at the month of September. Here in State College, these records go back on SCASIS, at least, obviously. Many different sources for this. 1893. So September ended up being the mean average temperature in State College was 64.3. So according to this particular database of data, ranks us 38th warmest for the mean average temperature. So it actually ended up not being near the top or near the bottom. So with that warm stretch we had towards the end of the month, obviously started cool. So nothing out of the ordinary ended up happening for the mean average temp. But in terms of tropics, here's the GEFS. This particular model image is displaying all of the lows, so the model is just printing an L, where for each particular member is thinking there's going to be a storm. I'll try to move this down towards the Gulf of Mexico. You see here, there's that remnant low that's providing some tropical rains to South Florida, just moves into the center of the Gulf. And then here comes what is Tropical Storm Nate up in the center part of the Gulf, and then that looks like it'll strengthen. Actually, the GEFS is a little bit west of where the official Hurricane Center track was, so there's still some uncertainty with where Nate is going to go, but it's a sure bet, as the Weather World folks say, that there's going to be some tropical impacts across the Gulf of Mexico states later this weekend and early next week. But outside of that, the weather for Penn State versus Northwestern, obviously that is in outside of the Chicago area. So that front I mentioned here locally lifts back to the north. We get some very strong, I think I had it pulled up, oh, I guess I didn't. I was going to show you that there's going to be some good warm advection on Saturday as that front lifts back to the north, but I don't know where I put that. So here is Saturday at 0Z. This is the European 6-hourly precip. And the you see everything else plotted. I believe these are 850 temps in degrees Celsius. So during the day Saturday, you see right here over here Chicago, right in here. Evanston, I believe, is off to the northwest of Chicago. So during the day Saturday, it looks mainly cloudy there. Doesn't look like the morning is going to be a washout. It looks like that some showers and storms from this front and storm are going to move in during the afternoon. So as of right now, I think at least a good chunk of the game there might be dry, but they're going to be tracking some rain that's going to be moving in. So it's a little bit up in the air, pun intended, as to how much rain will be there during the game, but does not look like a bright sunny day for Penn State versus Northwestern. But anyway, more on the tropics now. I'll let Paul go with that. Oh yeah, sure. I should surprise them. Yeah. What's he doing here? But yeah, it's going to be a pretty quiet weather pattern locally here for the next couple of days. But finally, there's going to be some interesting weather here as that remnant moisture from Nathan or Nate. Well, there's going to be a cold front that kind of parks itself over the east third of the United States, and that moisture is going to get lifted north early next week. So we could have some decent rains here early next week, Paul.
Yeah, and that really determines where Nate is going to go. And certainly there has been a lot of inconsistency with the overall track of Nate. We can take a look if we scroll. Let's see, how do we scroll here, Noah? Let's scroll up. Okay. Oh, yeah, okay, thanks. All right, so we'll look at the GFS, and we will take a look at the West Atlantic here, because that's where Nate is currently located. And pretty remarkable, actually, progression on the GFS over the last several runs. This is the current run, valid 0Z on Friday, October 6th. And here's Nate, kind of a compact storm within this broad monsoon gyre off the coast of Honduras here. And Nate is going to be moving off to the northwest and will impact the Gulf Coast to some extent. The only problem is that the GFS and many of the other models have been remarkably inconsistent with the progression of Nate. For example, this was the 6Z run, valid the same time frame, 0Z, Friday, October 6th. And Nate's really nowhere to be found. That's because it's a very weak low located inland over Honduras here. And this was the 6Z run. We'll look through that first. And a very weak run that kind of dissipated before it got to New Orleans on the GFS, a 6Z run. Now the most recent 12Z run has something different. And you can see there's obviously a very big change. These are pretty big changes within 24 hours here in the GFS. So the key message from this storm is that there's still a lot of uncertainty with regard to the intensity of Tropical Storm Nate when it makes its final approach to the United States. With that in mind, here is the progression of the GFS. We'll take a look at the mid-level spin here on the GFS. And there it is right here. You can actually see a lot better here. This is the 6Z run, way inland over Honduras here. And this is the 0Z run. But now the 12Z run is a little bit to the northeast of the 0Z and 6Z runs. So there's less land interaction. The storm itself is stronger. So we'll advance forward here. The GFS itself has really been struggling, though, with regard to developing these kind of random mid-level spins around Nate. You can really see that here with the 6Z progression here. There's all kinds of vorticity embedded in this monsoon gyre, but the GFS, we can take a look at the 6Z run yesterday, actually. That's probably the best example of this. The 6Z run yesterday actually had two centers orbiting each other, which obviously this is not happening. So the GFS has really been struggling with being able to fully resolve this storm and being able to determine what exactly is going to happen. And of course, this is completely unreasonable, and the GFS has corrected to something more reasonable. So this is currently where the GFS thinks it'll be in 18 hours, valid 6Z on Friday. Progressing forward, the GFS has a second landfall over the Yucatan Peninsula here, and as a result, the GFS shows quite a bit of land interaction. However, unfortunately, there's really not a lot to stop this storm from intensifying, though. How quickly it intensifies, of course, is an open question, but there really isn't a whole lot to stop it from strengthening. We can take a look at the upper level wind shear here, 200 to 850 millibar wind shear. All these colors around here are actually associated with Nate's outflow. So even though it might look like there's a lot of wind shear around Nate, there's really not, as a result of this upper level low here. We can look at the progression of this upper level low here moving forward. This right here, this upper level low actually shoots off to the southwest. And if this were to remain the same, there would be a lot of wind shear out in the progression of Tropical Storm Nate. But this upper level low right here actually scoots off to the southwest, and that allows for Nate to move to the north, northwest, northwest without much wind shear to talk about. You can really see that progression here. Nate is really not going to be dealing with a whole lot of wind shear. The water temperatures, we can take a look at that. Really not very cool at all. We're talking about temperatures that are in the 30s still. We'll try to see if we can zoom that in here. Right here, let's look at the West Atlantic. So there's really only one tiny little area that's 26, 27, 28. Right here in the West Caribbean, this unfortunately is an area that is very, very favorable for tropical cyclone formation. And you can see that we do have a large area of 80 plus degrees Fahrenheit. 30 degrees Celsius is approximately 86 degrees Fahrenheit. So these are the kinds of backwater temperatures we're going to be talking about with regard to Tropical Storm Nate. Any kind of dry air that could impact Tropical Storm Nate from strengthening? Not really. The upper level low itself does have a little bit of dry air associated with it. We can take a look at the PWATs associated with the GFS, precip moisture, MSLP PWAT, and we'll go to the West Atlantic. So here's Nate right here. You can see the PWATs are obviously higher, precipitable waters. And as we move forward, again, there really isn't a whole lot of dry air to speak of. There is this trough that is moving in, and that's going to eventually steer Nate off to the northeast. And on this particular run of the GFS, the surface pressure, the high-res surface pressure actually gets down to 986 right before it makes landfall. Again, though, should be stressed that the GFS has been very inconsistent. This was a 6Z run, and this was a 0Z run. So the GFS, unfortunately, doesn't appear to be very consistent with the progression of the storm. So therefore, any kind of GFS solution should be taken with somewhat of a grain of salt until more consistency arises. This really isn't an atypical location for storms to form, though. This is the October 1st through 10th tropical cyclone points of origin for the National Hurricane Center. And really, a big hotspot right here is the Western Caribbean. And Nate formed right around here. This is where Nate formed. So this isn't a very unusual area to expect tropical cyclone formation in the first 10 days of October. And looking ahead here, this is the next 10 days of October. We still expect to see this West Caribbean hotspot with Nate. And that West Caribbean hotspot is going to continue into the middle of the month. Will something else develop in the Western Caribbean by the time we reach the middle of the month into the later part of the month? It's unclear. We'll take a look at the MJO forecast from Dr. Michael Ventris, and that'll key in as to whether we have any kind of favorable upward motion or not over the Western Caribbean. So here's the MJO forecast right now. Very favorable right now. We have the MJO component of the 200 millibar vertical velocity is shown here in blue. Anywhere where you see blue, that's where the vertical velocity is upward. Anywhere where you see oranges or reds or yellows, that's where the vertical velocity is downward. So in other words, upward motion tends to favor convection, whereas sinking motion tends to favor subsidence and high pressure. So here is what it looks like right now, and obviously that's a very favorable look for tropical storms to form in the Western Caribbean. As we progress forward, though, notice what happens here with regard to the forecasted subsidence. And this right here is definitely more subsidence progressing to the east. And the upward motion is progressing further to the east in the tropical Atlantic. And the question is, could something form in the eastern Atlantic? It's always possible. You have some storms that did, but is it likely? Probably not. But anytime you get an MJO wave that goes through the Western Caribbean like this. It certainly signals that there could be potential trouble down the road. And we'll just take a quick look at the GFS ensembles here to see if we have any kind of threat down the road here. So the ensembles, of course, you take the GFS model, you run it with slightly different initial conditions with different members, and then you try to see what the solutions are. So the GFS is relatively quiet here. Not really too much to speak of, actually. Let's see. There is definitely some action trying to get going here in the Western Caribbean. And so there is definitely actually some kind of a signal here that there could be some tropical system forming in the month of October. Of course, the MJO being in its suppressed phase would make that less likely, but it is still possible to see this kind of tropical system form. This is where you would typically expect your tropical system to form. And actually, in the weather briefing that I did 2 weeks ago, we talked about the typical track progression where you have a storm develop in this part of the Caribbean, move off to the northwest, and then at some point, once it feels the influence of an upper level trough to the north, it'll progress off to the northeast as a result of that change in the mid-level and upper level steering pattern. And that's what actually is being shown here roughly on the GEFS, is this kind of progression here off to the northwest and then off to the northeast. And we'll quickly take a look at the current satellite image of NATE, just to show you how disorganized this is here. This is from the University of, the College of DuPage. What's really nice is that the GOES-R here is going to be, from my understanding, operational relatively soon. So all this preliminary non-operational is not, we won't have to include that as we talk about this storm, as we talk about future storms, that is. It looks like as the floater actually over NATE is no longer there in the College of DuPage, but this is the full disk view of GOES 16, there's NATE right here. It's a really big mess. You can really see the broad monsoon gyre really well here, but NATE is one system that's kind of embedded within this monsoon gyre. And there's that tropical wave that Noah was mentioning, currently located over Florida, bringing all kinds of bad weather to Florida, but this should not develop. It's interesting to note, though, that the European model actually wasn't really doing a whole lot with that tropical wave, but recently it's now showing a stronger signal with that, which was actually a trend to the GFS, inconsistent as the GFS has been. So if we look at the Western Atlantic here in the European model, we can really get a feel for what is going on here. So what is going to determine the track of NATE? What's going to determine the track of NATE is largely this upper level ridge to the east of NATE. And we'll take a look at the 500 millibar anomaly, so that's a little more clear. So that's the ridge off to the east here. And we'll look at the normalized anomaly to make it a little bit easier to see. So there's this ridge right here that's currently over the northeast part of the Gulf of Mexico. And this is essentially preventing an escape route for this to go this way. There is, however, this trough off to the northwest here that is going to allow for this storm to eventually make that turn to the northeast. But this ridge in the short term is going to keep this storm progressing to the northwest. So how strong this ridge has been a subject of debate. This was the ridge, how it looked yesterday at 0Z on the European model. Notice this ridge was a lot weaker on the European model, and so the European model was one of the further east solutions, and consequently, because the European model is one of the most reliable models we have, the National Hurricane Center gave a lot of weight, and the track was pretty far east, actually. The European model, since then, has really intensified this ridge compared to yesterday. It doesn't look like a lot, but it's enough to the point where where the storm is being forced more to the west. And if we continue forward here, the European does shoot this straight into Louisiana here. That was not the case yesterday at 12Z. We'll take a look at that. Notice that this ridge erodes pretty quickly, and this goes straight into Pensacola and Panama City on the 12Z Euro yesterday. But now, as a result of this ridge off to the northeast being a little bit stronger, you can really see that progression nicely here. The ridge right here was a little weaker here at 12Z. So this is the 12Z run. And of course, this isn't the same timestamp, but roughly speaking, the strength of the ridge should be similar. And so this is the 0Z. So clearly a further west ridge, stronger ridge. The storm is forced a little bit further west. And now the National Hurricane Center track, as NOAA was showing, is now into New Orleans. So that is what's primarily driving the progression of the storm. How many impacts will there be in central Pennsylvania from this? Really unclear. The models can't get the intensity of this storm correct. They can't really get the track of it correct. So if you can't get the intensity and the storm track correct, that's not a very good sign for any kind of forecast down the road. So this is what the European has verbatim here, is a remnant low of Nate moving into Pennsylvania. Some strong A50 winds with it, but nothing too extreme. If it phases with the trough, you could be dealing with a relatively moderate impact storm system. But again, it remains to be seen where exactly Nate will go, where exactly how strong Nate will get. And as a result, any kind of downstream impacts here in State College remain to be seen. And it looks like it is 1 o'clock now, so Noah and I will be happy to take any questions you might have.
I was just going to try to pull up and show you guys the GOES satellite so you can see a little closer of Nate.
Yes, Anthony.
So I just had a question. I don't know if you know this, but climatologically speaking, what are some typical intensity? So like, how does a hurricane usually intensify for the month of October? Does it usually grow to a Cat 2, Cat 3, or is it around Cat 1?
So intensity, there really isn't a climatology for intensity. Really depends, because there have been very, very intense storms in October. Hurricane Mitch was a Category 5. Hurricane Wilma, Hurricane Michelle was a Category 4. Hurricane Roxanne was a Category 3, I believe. So there really isn't any kind of climatology for intensity. Of course, you don't typically expect hurricanes the further down the month you go, but if a tropical storm or a hurricane were to form, there really isn't anything stopping that storm from getting to a Category 5 if conditions that are favorable are present.
Yeah, before we go, I wanted to just give you guys a 30-second power commercial break of what to expect the next couple of days, just to leave it fresh in your mind. Saturday looks like it could be a sneaky warm day. Temperatures up maybe in the lower 80s. Lots of sun. So looks like definitely some nice weather to get outside and enjoy. But other than that, like Paul said, Sunday, big changes move in, and early next week you could have some rain. But yeah, the big takeaway I'd say from the local forecast is Saturday, a nice sunny day. Temperatures maybe 82, 84. Sunday, a few more clouds, a little bit cooler. And then Monday through Wednesday next week, looks like it could be dealing with some heavy rain. So enjoy Saturday, because it looks like it could be one of the last 80 plus days we see in my mind. But not out of the woods yet. There's still could be some warmth later next week with a ridge that builds back in. But our 80 plus days are being numbered, I'll say that. So make sure to enjoy.
All right. And next week is Ben Rember. You remember.
Did you